So much energy today. So much energy.
Thank you very much. Welcome back to the CONVO Couch, ladies and gentlemen. I am Pasta Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella.
I'm glad you came in soon because we were arguing about this stupid Gillette commercial left and right, but we can't get into that today.
Yeah, we can't because
we got so much stuff going on.
But Pasta and I have different viewpoints on that, of course.
We do, of course, and that's what makes the show so great and stuff. So after I was done crying, Fiorella wiped my tears and said, let's get to it. Now, fam, I'm going to let you start off because I know you're going to be crazy about this here today.
Well, first of all, there's breaking news today. Syria, there was an attack claimed by ISIS in Syria where U.S. soldiers were killed. And you can already see the mainstream media, CNN, saying, well, this is exactly why we can't leave Syria. Yeah. And, you know, it's just going to fuel these terrorists. And
I just wanted to
Donald
Trump.
It's not even about Donald Trump. It's about us staying there, because it's not just Donald Trump who wanted to get out. He was just kind of back and forth with that. It was people like Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard. And speaking of Tulsi Gabbard, I'm super fed up, fam.
Super fed up.
I have to set the record straight on a lot of the things that are coming out on Tulsi, because as soon as she announced that she was running for president, within hours of her announcement, all of these articles.
They're afraid.
I think so.
Very afraid of Tulsi.
All of these articles that had been, that were basically regurgitations of previous articles came out, basically attacking her, calling her anti-LGBT, anti-Muslim, saying that she was a warmonger, which is actually the opposite of what she is. So timing is everything. And some of these things seem coordinated in the way the mainstream media has let them out. Like, it's just, if you go online and you Google Tulsi Gabbard, you'll just see a plethora of all these things that I'm saying. Yeah. We've seen this before. We saw it when Bernie Sanders, you know, when people were saying he was going to run and he was going to announce, all these sexual harassment claims came out. And before, even in 2016, calling him a sexist, calling him a misogynist, saying that he doesn't like black people.
He's an old white man, fam.
While there are always concerns for harassment in any campaign, for some reason, you know, they wanted to make Bernie Sanders the one that carried all the weight. Yeah. While there's always some concern for you know, for any kind of harassment or any kind of, you know, just corruption in any campaign, you know, they exploit that and take it to the max. So I wanted to do this today, where I wanted to go over every single thing that
Can I say something though? I mean, because you're talking like that. Hey, man, it's smears. It's a smear campaign to kind of put it down. But aren't some of these things? Can't progressives be a little bit concerned about these things? I mean, because you caught me the other day. Well, fam, I heard about this, I heard about that, and you said, well, you're just repeating stuff. Do you know the depths of what's going on? And you started explaining to me. I said, okay. I still think they're concerning questions, even if you are progressive.
Of course.
So let's go through it. I'm going to play the part of a person who's opposing Tulsi Gabbard. And what you're going to do is you're going to defend your girl and tell us why these attacks aren't merited. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. The bell is rang for number one. Well, The Intercept wrote an article claiming that she has ties to Hindu nationalists. And we've known a couple of people in our circle get really upset about this. We know a couple Indian people who are upset, not mentioning any names. But is this true, fam?
Okay, so in order to answer that question, you kind of have to be aware of the complex foreign policy, which the majority of people have absolutely no idea about. And that's where I see that we need to make our efforts stronger. So Tulsi Gabbard is actually a practicing Hindu.
Yes.
She practices yoga. She is very much in tune with Hinduism. She grew up in a conservative Christian family where they were obviously practicing Christianity. So let me talk a little bit about this. Modi is an issue she needs to clarify, because most people hear one side. And
who is Modi?
Modi is a nationalist. He's a right wing in India. The leader of the right wing movement in India. He's one of many leaders that she has spoken to. Okay, let me just go back here for a minute. Gabbard comes from a veteran background. Okay,
military household.
Not only military household, but she served in Iraq, as you know.
Yes.
And she also has a way of acting as an ambassador, as a foreign diplomat, and talks to many leaders and many people across the board. So she set up several meetings with Modi and other Hindu nationalists and other people from all kinds across the aisle, all political spectrums across the aisle in India. So it's definitely being targeted and exploited to discredit her because she is an anti-imperialist and a threat to the status quo. So India's relations with Pakistan have a lot to do with this. Pakistan and India have been at odds for a really long time. Pakistan and India have nuclear weapons pointed at each other.
Yeah.
A lot of Pakistanis have been actually the ones spreading, not Pakistani people, but the Pakistani political pundits and political politicians there have been attacking her as well. And there's a lot in Pakistan. There's a huge pro-Muslim push, and Tulsi has always talked about the danger in Muslim extremists. There's a difference between Muslim extremists and people who practice the Muslim religion just in a very peaceful way.
Yeah.
And we've had a wide-ranging discussions on several issues our countries have in common, she said regarding Modi, including how America and India can work together to help combat this global threat posed by Islamic extremism. Much of this conflict is what she referenced. So while Gabbard may appear to Indians to be appealing to Indians for her background, she views foreign relations in a different scope than most of the black and white media. So while our entire Western media unilaterally argues that Modi is awful, and he may very well be, Gabbard cannot be that emotional when trying to get him on the side. So if we're talking in a way to try to achieve peace with the very people we're having conflict with, you cannot come at them in a very negative, in a very exploitive manner.
Yeah.
And so I have this graphic here where she speaks about, she did this in an interview, and she says, there are many different areas and sectors where the United States and India's growing friendship can cover mutually beneficial ground, such as defense, renewable energy, bilateral trade, and global environmental concerns, such as climate change. Modi impressed me as a person who cares deeply about these issues and as a leader whose example and dedication to the people he serves should be an inspiration for elected officials everywhere. It is very important that the U.S. and India have a strong relationship of mutual respect. The denial of a visa to Prime Minister Modi could have undermined that relationship had he used it as an excuse to reject having a strong bilateral relationships with America. This would have been bad for both our countries, for many reasons, not the least of which is the war against terrorists. The relationship between India and America is very important. So I think she may be wrong on this, but it's more than meets the eye, because this is despite that the fact in 2012, India's Supreme Court appointed Special Investigations Team probe found no prosecutable evidence against Modi for those allegations.
Cool.
So there are these allegations against Modi, but the Supreme Court found no evidence of it. Now, we only hear one side of it because we only hear the Western media. And even our efforts to go and listen to Eastern media are generally subverted.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Obama's close relationship with Modi. Obama was promoting Modi in a bromance type of way. And CNN talked about this, if you all remember. So why is it Tulsi that is singled out for doing the same? And not only Obama, Hillary Clinton met with many like Muslim nationalists as well. And they called her a friend, a family. Yeah. And like, why is it that right now we're hyper-focusing on her? I honestly don't agree with the way she still sees the threat of Islam or Islamic extremists so high. But if we're honest, there is a small portion of people who are extremists in any religion. Yeah. And she goes on to talk about this. And she talks about how her experience in the past in the military has influenced her. My deployment in the Middle East reinforced the fundamental military wisdom that you can't defeat an enemy if you don't understand him. We cannot win this war if we do not understand our enemy's goals or the ideology that inspires them and fuels their recruitment propaganda. And the first step to understanding an enemy is correctly identifying him in a way that makes clear his ideology. So Tulsi is the kind of person that will go talk to her enemies to figure them out and to figure out how to go from there. A lot of people don't understand that.
I don't even know if they should call them enemies. They should probably call them adversaries, you know what I'm saying? Because it's really who is an enemy and whatnot. And this seems like the same type of rhetoric, fam. And as we're going through this, and I didn't know this, I just, once again, somebody threw it out there. I'm like, well, did she support legislation? Did she take money from them? No, she went over to talk. It's almost like the same parallel of when people talk to Assad. They called them Assad apologist or whatnot and stuff, and kind of, frame them. But yet, Obama's doing the same thing, and then Tulsi gets singled out. So I'm going to mark this down right here so far, and I know you got some new things, but the first one that comes to the Hindu nationalists, it's a smear campaign for the first one. I'm not buying it. I'm glad she went and talked. I think we need to have unilateral talks. And then she clarified everything she said right there. So I'm okay with this first one.
And just let me quickly add that they actually like her because they feel like they can relate to her because she's a practicing Hindu. And she's a very powerful one at that in their eyes. And so they actually donated to her without ever her asking. Individuals donated to her. So a report in the Telegraph, and this is from an interview with QZ, a report in the Telegraph, an Indian newspaper, referred to you as a mascot for the right-wing RSS in India. How do you respond to that? Do you think that is true? And would you like to be associated with the RSS? Tulsi says, both in India and here in the U.S., I've held meetings with members of both the BJP and the Congress Party. As a member of the U.S. Congress, my interest is in helping produce a closer relationship between the United States and India, not just between the United States and one political party of India. I have no affiliation with the RSS. Sometimes people on both sides, for their own purpose, try to say that I somehow favor or am part of the BJP or take photos of me at Indian events and circulate them for their own promotional reasons. But the fact is, I'm not partial to the BJP, the Congress Party, or any other particular political party in India.
Boom. Fam, it's just like the one thing they take a side, the mainstream media, which is the military-industrial complex's little lapdog, they're going to point out and spew their narrative. And that's what they're doing. They're doing it right here with Tulsi Gabbard. They're trying to take one side and demonize her. Oh, look at this. She's, in with, Assad apologist. Oh, she's in with Modi. Just like when people talk to Putin. Oh, my God, they're bad. They take a point, they nail it, and they smear. And what she's actually doing is great. And what she said really resonates. I'm not particularly close with any party in India. I spoke to both parties because I want relationships between the United States and India as a whole, not just one party.
Right.
Fam, that is great. I'm glad you pointed it out. People, you got to be watching this. That is great, fam. You know what I'm saying? I hope you put somebody in his place for talking shit about Donnell. Go ahead.
In order to understand Tulsi, you have to understand that this is a veteran that's well-versed in foreign diplomacy who wants peace, but knows that attacking those enemies or potential enemies will not give us that. So because Modi is the prime minister, they put him in the forefront, and because he has these views that are problematic, and I agree they're problematic, I'm not dismissing the worries of people who are practicing the Islamic faith in a peaceful way. It is why they highlight this and they use this against her, because she's actually trying to resolve conflict rather than use the old American tactic of bullying and being the bully. Because as you know, America is only strong when we bully other countries with war and into submission. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I think we need to start thinking about how others see us. And this is actually from her site, from her 2020 www.tulsigabbard.org. As part of her diplomatic work, Tulsi has also met with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Their meeting focused on enhanced cooperation in the fight against Islamic terrorism, working together to protect the environment and maximizing economic opportunities between the two countries. Tulsi's meeting with Modi was part of her congressional responsibilities as a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
Awesome.
Those who criticize Tulsi's meeting and attribute India's politics to Tulsi, attribute Modi's politics to Tulsi, etc., because Tulsi and Modi both happen to be Hindu and had a professional diplomatic meeting and are clearly plagued by a severe case of anti-Hindu bigotry, which goes completely against the spirit of aloha that Tulsi is consistently and constantly working to promote.
Boom, fam. That's great. That's great. I mean, this is some great stuff because this is the area. We know we had some friends who are Indian that just really took offense to the whole Modi thing. But as we're explaining this as it goes along, I wasn't aware of all this stuff. So, I mean, like the great thing about the CONVO Couch shows, you got to do the research. But we're all across the board on so much stuff, you know. And
it'd be very easy to just follow what you hear and then just assume that it's correct when actually that's not the case. And in this graphic, you can see all of the House committees she's part of: the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific. She's also on the Subcommittee of Emerging Threats and Capabilities. And as a member of those committees, it's her responsibility to meet and have talks with world leaders. I mean, it's not anything out of the norm for someone in her position.
She's doing her job, fam.
She's met with people in Japan, the Prime Minister Abe in Japan, ex-President Park in the Republic of Korea, and China's Premier Li Keqiang in Beijing. President and Prime Minister of the Kurdish Regional Government, the Prime Minister of Iraq, the Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel, King Abdullah in Jordan, etc. She has met each and every one of these people and had warm relations with prominent critics of the Prime Minister Modi, like Shashi Tharoor and Rajiv Gowda. So she's talked to the opposition, the people who don't like Modi as well. So all of that you're hearing is a very one-sided thing. And I don't have any reason to defend Tulsi other than I don't like to see things that aren't true be put out there and people repeating them without knowing what they're saying. Well, so
I mean, she's doing what she's doing as part of her diplomatic duties.
Yeah,
that's what she has to do. I don't like the leader of Israel, Netanyahu, right? But if Bernie becomes president, I want him going to talk to him. And if I see them together, that doesn't mean I'm going to automatically stamp them and push them together as the same ideology. And that's the problem. They always want to thwart discourse. We need to talk about these things. We need to have these hard conversations. And so do we politically across the board. And Tulsi did the right thing when she went and talked. It was her job. She was doing her job. She didn't take a position. She went to repair the breach. Yeah. And she's getting smeared for it. Let's move on to the other one because I think we can put that one out of the park. I'm no longer going to bring up that Hindu nationalism thing. If somebody says something, I'm going to look into it and then tell me what you saw. Okay. So here's the second one, fam. Number 2. Give me the bell. Where's my bell? Come on. Give me my bell. Here we go. All right. Number 2. All right. Tulsi defended, and she said she was offended that some people criticized the fact that there were too many generals holding high position in Trump's cabinet. Here, take a look. It's a video.
Are we muted? No? Okay. Just wanted...
Quick, before you go, I know there's some of your colleagues, Democrats, have expressed concern about too many retired generals being in the Trump cabinet. You have the National Security Advisor, General Flynn, and then also he's talked about General Mattis and General Kelly at the Pentagon and Homeland Security. Do you share their concerns or do you disagree?
I don't share their concerns. In fact, as a veteran and as someone who's still serving in the Hawaii Army National Guard, I find it pretty offensive for people to outright discriminate against veterans. Here you have generals who have literally spent their whole lives serving our country, putting service before self, putting their lives on the line to defend democracy, and yet people are criticizing them and discriminating against them, saying just because you served as a general previously, you are disqualified from serving in a high position of leadership in our government. These people arguably have put far more on the line and are far more deeply personally committed to upholding and protecting our democracy than their critics.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, thanks so much. Always good.
All right, fam, let me just say something real quick before you go on this, because I know you want to defend her and stuff. But this is a tough one to swallow, because I understand that she's a veteran, that she's been in the military, you know, and when they, you know, her heart and her mind lies there. But some people think it's a political move to say that she's going to cast a lot of independent votes who believe that we are fighting for truth and justice and democracy out there. And they think it's somewhat contradictory to her mentality about, hey, we should pull out of these wars. We shouldn't be there. And all those people that we put up there, you know, you talk about Flynn, Mad Dog Matthias, you know what I'm saying? And Kelly. Mm-hmm. Kelly is the only one I like of that. But you have to come to some grips that putting a lot of these generals in positions in the highest in the cabinets are not necessarily the best thing, because they are going to be pro-war. Fam.
Yeah, I agree. I actually disagree with what she's actually saying. in this context, I think, but she's anti-war. She's always talking about getting us out of Syria, getting us out of the Middle East. She's talking about stopping our need for regime change wars. She's anti-war, but her background in the military, I think, lends her a soft spot for veterans. And I think this is a personal thing for her. And I think this is something that we should be watchful of, but also understand the context to which this is happening, because we've never had an anti-war veteran as president or as a potential presidential candidate. That is like, a candidate like her is very unique because she's extremely anti-war, yet she respects the military and has a sort of like thankful perspective of it because of all the influence and all the education that it gave her in terms of how she perceives foreign diplomacy. And I think I trust her judgment in terms of the knowledge that she has, because foreign relations are very difficult for most people to understand, and even explaining it, it's so much information. And I think we should be able to talk about it, though, in a way that's nuanced and in a way that the general public can understand. And I think this is the first step in having someone like that, because she can actually talk about it and actually have hands-on experience and still say we don't need to be in more wars. Yeah. So I think this is something, we should definitely watch. Yeah. And I think,
can I say something, Fam? I really do think, like what you said, she has a soft spot in her heart for military veterans, and so do I. You know what I'm saying? And so many times we piss and crap on the men and women of the military. You know what I'm saying? As if they're, I mean, and don't get me wrong, why they're fighting and who's controlling the military, I have serious problems with, and I think that's where the disconnect comes when you're talking about generals as compared to everyday military personnel who you have a soft spot in your heart for, because they have no choices, they can't get an education, they don't have the money, so they go and they join the military and they end up fighting these senseless, stupid wars for rich oligarchs, and it's disgusting. However, when you hear those talks about people coming back from Vietnam and being called a baby killer and all this other stuff, you can only feel for them. They were doing what they thought was right. So I did give a kind of pass on this one, but I want her to clarify too
100%,
in the future that, hey, listen, I'm going to be conscious of what general I will be putting where and when. Because a lot of these military men, they only see one way: military, and we need more discussions, rather than just to act and be reactive.
And precisely because of that, I think someone like her would be, rather than Trump appointing these people, would be a better kind of like, what am I thinking? Like a better kind of like medium between the generals and between the public, because she can understand both ends of the spectrum. And this is on her website. She says Tulsi is the leading voice in Congress calling for an end to America's interventionist wars of regime change that have cost our nation trillions of dollars and thousands of lives, simultaneously creating more devastation, human suffering, and refugees in countries where the U.S. regime change wars is waged. So she literally talks about what we do. This is something that you won't hear from most candidates besides Bernie Sanders.
And that is something really big to point out, that, I always tell people, I got excited when Tulsi announced, and when people always say, oh, who did you want to be your vice president for Bernie Sanders if he runs? I always say it's Tulsi Gabbard, because she's an anti-war veteran.
Yeah.
You got to put the comma there.
Unheard of.
But she is anti-war. Most of her rhetoric, especially since her time in the military, and she's seen these things, she has digressed to say, wait a second, maybe we shouldn't strike first, whatnot. Maybe we shouldn't act these ways. There are some situations, and like you said, she has had a soft spot for veterans. This is a tricky one, but once again, I'm willing to excuse it and look the other way and say, okay, I'm going to keep an eye on it, but I'm not going to.
I don't think we need to look the other way. I think she does need to clarify, but I think, it's one of those things where any other candidate is going to have these things that we just don't necessarily agree with. I don't think it's a reason to discount it, because she's constantly speaking out against war in action and voting against war. She voted against Trump's inflated
She's been vocal
budget.
About it more than anybody else. She's been
even
when she was on Jimmy Dore, she says that, why do you think that people don't like Assad? Because Assad's not their bitch. You know what I'm saying? So she
Yeah.
talks about these things. She talks it like it is. She says it like she is. But let's get into the third one over here because it kind of ties to this one. Give me my bell. Come on. Let's go. Come on, Tulsi. Give me that. Let's go. Let's go. Come on. I got you. Hold on. Here we go. There we go. 3. Tulsi also supported a bill that gave her some clout amongst Republicans. It stated that every refugee from Syria and Iraq would require a serious vetting process, ultimately denying them entry into the United States. The Intelligencer put that up right over here. In 2015, a vote on a bill that would subject Iraqi and Syrian refugees to the predecessor of Trump's extreme vetting won Gabbard friends in Republican circles. And this was pointed out by John Connors at the time, supporting this bill would effectively deny refugee status for Syrians and Iraqis who are victim of terrorism in their own homelands. Now, fam, this is something that is concerning because I understand Tulsi Gabbard, or Tulsi Gabbard, depending on who's speaking, has seen what terrorists do front and center. She understands the radicalness of once that line is crossed and the mine is there, how bad they could be. So I think that she wanted to make sure that everybody was vetted coming in, 100%. But she took a lot of slack for this because a lot of people like myself said, hey, just like the people down from Honduras that are coming up, this is our fault. We have to take responsibility.
And she's very well aware of that.
Go ahead. Tell me what you think because a lot of people say...
I think she's very well aware of that. And I think I don't think she made the right choice in the way she framed her vote because I just think that you have to kind of weigh the balance of what you're saying. So she said the majority of Muslims are practicing the spiritual path of Islam within their own lives in a pluralistic, peaceful way. So by calling organizations like ISIS Islamic or Islamist extremist, she emphasized that we are making a distinction between the vast majority of Muslims who are not extremists and a handful of those who are. So here Gabbard is referencing the difference between extremist and peaceful practicing Muslims. Again, this is where her unique perspective as a progressive hippie mixed with a war vet is kind of at odds. And while we can say that Muslim extremists aren't widespread, there is a radical ideology, just as Christianity, that does exist. And I think she was speaking to that because she's seen it firsthand. But I think she's very well aware that it is only a minority, and she has never said that these Muslim extremists are widespread, and she has never been anti-Muslim or anti-Islamic. She's only been anti-extremist. And another thing regarding that is that you can go on her website and you can go on this link, the Medium link, where it's called Tulsi is our friend. And where she's consistently hung out with a Syrian woman. She's hanging out with all kinds of Muslim people. And it's not like she doesn't understand. And she wasn't for Trump's ban on Muslims either. So there's like a little bit of nuance in that, and microscopic on every single thing she's done. But I do think that vote is something that is like, whoa, like, well, this is inadvertently, I get what you're saying, but this is actually going to hurt some innocent people. Yeah. So I think we would need to know the specifics of exactly every single minor little context of that particular bill.
I think this is something too that's also, I mean, I know it was, some of the progressives look at it as a negative, but I think it's sometimes some of the tactics she used and her overall opinions and the way she handles things, it's going to get a lot of independents, because a lot of independents go, oh, you know what I'm saying? Of course I want people to come into our country, but I want to make sure there's the right people are coming in, that we're not letting in the crazy terrorists that we created in the first place. I mean, nobody's denying that. I mean, I think there are a lot of people on the right that do deny it, but a lot of people in general understand that we've created a lot of these problems. So yeah, let's come in, but let's make sure it's the right people. And her rhetoric, the way she speaks to that, it seemed very practical at times. And I think that, you know, her going on Joe Rogan, I said this Joe Rogan isn't a big political guy. You know, she's going after independence outside the bubble. She understands who supports her, and she understands who she needs to support her. And this is the area where I always said, regardless if you don't like Tulsi or not on these things, she's an anti-war veteran. So a lot of people are going to respect her because she was a war veteran. People who are center-leaning right independents will respect her. She can get those votes. And I think what she says right here sometimes is somewhat practical. It's not as the mainstream media is making it and putting it out like she's a complete villain, and she's awful and stuff. And just like this next one, give me my bell. Do you have anything else to say on that one? You want to
well, yeah, real quick on that one. It's kind of like she has that military, like, okay, I'm going to look at this practically, not emotionally. And the problem with a lot of the left is they look at things only emotionally, and which we should have empathy and compassion. And that's what we love about Bernie Sanders, because that is the kind of thing he practices. And not saying that she isn't compassionate or empathetic, but she also has a lot of experience into the reality of how what we've done so far in our interactions with other people are, and what we have caused for other people's hatred. She's very well aware of the hatred towards America that exists in the Middle East. And so she's, I think, a little bit more cautious than someone who hasn't been to war. And I think that definitely affects how she thinks. But I also see that in every legislative piece that she has, she's anti-war. Yeah. So I'm looking at her actions rather than trying to figure out her words and what they mean as much. And I think that's what we should do on all politicians, is look at their voting record, and her voting record speaks for itself.
Okay.
So,
well, let's go to the next one, because this is where it gets a little bit crazy, because you know those establishment type love to talk about she has a history of anti-LGBT behavior. Tulsi Gabbard once touted working for an anti-gay group that backed conversation. Is that conversion? Sorry, not conversation. Conversion therapy. Sorry. So, fam, what do you have to say to this? Because this is one that I was like, oh my God, it was years ago she said this stuff. But why don't you go ahead and unpack this a little bit more? Because, you know. So
when Tulsi Gabbard was 21, she was against the idea of homosexuality. Mm-hmm. She grew up in a conservative Christian family where her dad was actually one of the prominent anti-LGBT, protesters. He would go and he would protest. He also was involved in politics. He held
this was 16 years ago, by the way, right?
Yeah. Okay. She was 21. And then she went to war. And when she went to war, she interacted with all kinds of people. And by the way, Tulsi did address this a long time ago, and she did again recently apologize. Mm-hmm. So let me just
I thought this was settled in 2012. So
no, apparently not, because now we need to be reminded of it for
But Hillary Clinton at the age of 40 can say, "Oh, I'm against gay marriage, and that's okay." But
and then she just switched it because she was running. Yeah,
please.
So she said, "First, let me say I regret the positions I took in the past and the things I said. I'm grateful for those in the LGBTQ community who have shared their aloha with me throughout my personal journey. Over the past 6 years in Congress, I have been fortunate to have had the opportunity to help work towards passing legislation that ensures equal rights and protections on LGBTQ issues, such as the Equality Act, the repeal of DOMA, Restore Honor to Service Members Act, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, the Safe Schools Improvement Act, and the Equality for All Resolution. Much work remains to ensure equality and civil rights protections for LGBTQ Americans. And if elected president, I will continue to fight for equal rights for all." So this is her rebuttal. And I wanted to read that because people were saying that she needed to address it, and she had addressed it
years ago.
But she addressed it again because of everything that's been happening, so on and so forth. So let me go back. She was 21. She held this belief. She was influenced by her family. And it was, here's the thing that pisses me off. Democrats in the establishment and a bunch of, identity politics loving progressives like to point out that this is out of step from the Democratic Party. Like, she's not in line with the Democratic Party. And that's entirely false, because during this time between the 90s and the early 2000s, the majority of people, especially Democrats, especially Republicans, both of them were anti-LGBT.
They were.
They were literally, they were literally against homosexuality. It hasn't been until recently that we've actually had success in having LGBTQ representation. And we're still, as she said, working towards that. So actually, she was very much in line with the Democratic Party at that time. And I think saying that, and I've seen it in the mainstream media and all over my Facebook, is, oh yeah, she's not in line. She's not in line. No, actually, she was in line back then. And now, since she had a genuine moment where she realized this is not okay. And you know what? A lot of how we grow up and a lot of our experiences are from our parents. And if her parents, taught her this, she had to leave to figure it out for herself.
Can I tell you something, fam? I'm going to share a little quick personal story, and not to get too deep down the rabbit hole, but I can remember my upbringing. You know what I'm saying? I grew up in a predominantly Italian-American family. My grandfather, who grew up in Brooklyn, my dad and mom, who grew up in Brooklyn, race tensions were high. Everything was segregated from Italian blocks, black people, black African-Americans, maybe some Jewish and stuff, but it was mostly predominantly Italian. And if you ever see a Bronx Tale, there's a lot of stuff. So I heard the N-word at my dinner table all the time. I heard the F word saying F-A-G, about homosexuals all the time, and when you're constantly around that, that program gets in there. When I broke away, when I moved to California, I was so open to find out what life was really about, what the world was so about. I changed my views. The programming was let go. Everything that I grew up around with, I was able to make my own decisions and see for myself. I don't understand why people are not, giving Tulsi the same type of, leeway. She grew up in a very conservative family. We all have those conservative members in our family.
Mm-hmm.
That uncle at Thanksgiving who doesn't shut the hell up, forget about him. We all have those type of programming, and sometimes we need a little time to break away. These things were said when she was 22 years old. She apologized for them early. She got out, and once again, that time in the military, it really changes people because, there are gay people in the military. I think we need to give her the leeway. These things were said a long time ago. The stigma about gay people back in the days was so different than it is right now. You know what I'm saying?
And it's recent. And Obama and Hillary also said they personally believed marriage was between a man and a woman. During that time, and even after that time. And so she's no longer a Christian. She's a Hindu, as I said. And she has completely different views than her father. She's constantly said that. Her and her father have, kind of parted ways in that regard. She says, experiencing as a woman firsthand the impacts of countries that are acting as moral arbiters for their people, it really caused me to rethink the positions I held. She's already held office and voted for pro-LGBTQ legislation. Like we said, a lot of those virtue signaling might want to look back at themselves and think of someone, think that they've never, ever done something they regretted. Maybe be a little bit more honest with yourself because, I guess he who's never made a mistake or regretted something, throw the first rock. And I think further, the mainstream media is using LGBTQ people to get votes and to manipulate and politicize this, because this is exactly what they do. But at the end of the day, when we're actually enacting legislation that protects people, we have to look at that. And a lot of the times, the same people touting about LGBTQ this and people of color this don't actually act on it in real life or when it comes to a vote. So that's something we have to
I love
look
it
at.
when you talk about the people who are virtue signaling, because we're going to talk about somebody else later on the show that I think is a huge virtue signaling. I hate it when people have to go out. I don't hate it, but I just don't understand it when they have to say, oh, I'm a feminist, I'm LGBT. Just show me by your actions. Just show me in legislation. Show me how you're really standing up for everybody, especially the LGBT community. You don't have to say it. You have to show it. And the people who say it sometimes don't show it. So, that is that. But fam, we're getting to the hard part right now because this is where you're going to have to dig down deep, okay? Give me my bell. Where we at? Pugilist. Here we are. Look at this. Come on.
Ridiculous.
Come on. All right. Over here like this. Ready? Over here like this. There's my bell. Okay, she is taking money from some questionable groups. Now, let's put this up. This is from Open Secrets. And I want you to pay attention, pay attention to number 7 right there. Now, we can all see that there's Microsoft on there. There's Kaiser Permanente. But the one that bothers me the most is Environet Incorporated. It is a defense contractor. Now, it is a defense contractor in the way of construction, infrastructure, rebuilding stuff, engineering, that sort of thing. They're not an actual weapons manufacturer, but it is concerning that she has got a few dollars from some defense contractors. Fam, what do you got to say? Kaiser too.
She's a military veteran, and the amount of money she's received is minimal. It is not like a PAC.
Yeah.
When it's generally like that, when it's that small, it's the majority of people who work in that industry. And I think you're going to be seeing a lot of military support for her because she's a veteran. And even though some of these veterans might disagree with her anti-war stance, they respect her because she's a veteran, and she's also a veteran that's gone overseas and tried to, and actually understands foreign diplomacy and has tried to work with the mess that we've pretty much made everywhere else.
Yeah.
And let me talk about Kaiser. There's something, Kaiser was one of the things that worried many people. Kaiser may not be something we're cool or comfortable with in general, but the donations are too small to be corporate.
Yeah.
It's likely that she's received donations from employees because Kaiser, as many of you may not know, has a KP, Kaiser Permanente, Veterans Association.
Yes, they do.
So Kaiser is on the 2018 military-friendly top 10 gold employer list, up from number 3 in 2017. This marks the third consecutive year that the organization has been recognized as a military-friendly employer by Victory Media, publisher of GI Jobs and other military-friendly brands. So what we need to look at is we need to separate the fact that just because you're anti-war doesn't mean you're anti-vet. There's a lot of nuance to that. You can be a veteran that refuses to continue to send other people to war because you know the toll that takes on you mentally, physically, emotionally. And I think we're going to see a lot of veterans come out and support her. In fact, she's could possibly take away, more than likely, 90%, all this veteran support from Donald Trump because she's actually doing things and has done things to help veterans.
Yeah.
And
I think
that's the strong point.
I think that her and Bernie are, and that's the thing that a lot of people on the left, these establishment-minded types or centrists or whatever you want to call them nowadays, I'm sorry, whatever you want to call yourselves nowadays if you're out there watching, they don't realize the fact that these two particular candidates we're talking about, Tulsi, because she's jumped into the ring, and Bernie Sanders from before, actually do purge and take a lot of independent votes away from the right, okay? Yep. They're considered to be like, you know what I'm saying? I think Tulsi Gabbard will take more votes away from the right, from Donald Trump, than Bernie Sanders would. I think Bernie Sanders is going to get more of the labor than anything else. But those people in the middle right now, those anti-war, the anti-war war veteran, she has respect. She will purge a lot of votes away from Donald Trump. And that's something that Kamala Harris is not capable of doing. Elizabeth Warren is not capable of doing. We know Hillary Clinton wasn't capable of doing it. So that's something to keep in mind. So, fam, I'm going to ask you one final question, fam. And I'm going to look into the TV while I do it. Why is Tulsi Gabbard a good choice to be president?
So look, no candidate is above reproach, especially one running for president. I think it's fine that she's vetted. I think she needs to come and answer some of these questions that we have today. But there's a difference between highlighting misconstrued info out of context and criticism of a candidate. I think Tulsi would be great because she understands foreign diplomacy, unlike anyone I've seen, because of her veteran status and because of the fact that she's traveled everywhere and has experience in Congress and has experience before that within the state legislature of Hawaii. And she is a peace-seeking, regime-changing, anti-regime changing war veteran.
And she's been talking about it for a while.
Something unique. She supports the Green New Deal.
Yes, she does.
Medicare for all, takes no corporate PAC money, supports election integrity. In fact, she has spoken out that
Very
that's one of the
important to me.
key issues in election integrity. And she stepped down from power to go and endorse Bernie Sanders. And after that, ever since then, they've been trashing her. And that's something, as a burner, I will never forget. I will never forget that she did that. Because Elizabeth Warren, she didn't do it. And she wouldn't do it. And let's see. Other than that, I think that she can get the Republican and independent vote. I think that she'd be a wonderful Secretary of State, even more than a VP, because not only is that a powerful position, but it should be a position of power that's in the hands of someone that does not want to exploit it.
Yes.
And I think she'd be a great VP with Bernie, but I think the establishment is going to try their hardest to make that not happen, which is why we're seeing all of these coordinated attacks on Bernie and Tulsi.
Yeah.
And they're actually working together. And I believe that. And I'm very involved in right now in organizing for Bernie and all of that. And I don't think she's perfect, and I think she has her faults like any other candidate. But I think like her and Bernie together are a threat to the establishment. They're a threat to the military-industrial complex. They're a threat to the status quo, to capitalism as it's structured, corporate capitalism. And I think this is why together they would be a perfect match, because Bernie has a domestic policy, Tulsi has a foreign policy. the intelligence, and I think they also agree a lot on trade and how harmful the TPP was, and on how NAFTA is terrible, and they see eye to eye on that, and so.
Bernie up there on my right shoulder. Put your Bernie on my shoulder. Fam, I got to tell you this much, though. I really love what you said about Tulsi Gabbard possibly being the Secretary of State. I think that's great. Listen, fam, I think I got to be honest with you, not just because you're my fam. You've convinced me. You know what I'm saying? You haven't convinced me that all men are trash yet, but you convinced me that Tulsi Gabbard deserves to be president, and she is great. And these are coordinated attacks. We've seen them before. And one of the things you also pointed out that I thought was great is that she is also for election integrity.
And before we shift to the next subject, understand that Tulsi and Bernie come from this spectrum, and they're going up against everybody on this spectrum. And they're having so many Democratic establishment candidates. These candidates are going to come out, give their delegates to, let's say, Kamala Harris or their picked candidate. Bernie would be left alone if Tulsi wasn't there. So I agree with my man, Nico House. We need more progressives there. And the fact that Tulsi's there, and I think she can finish strong, is good, because I think Bernie is going to have the most votes as far as progressives go. And I think her and Bernie together, it's got to be, we can't afford to really have another establishment neocon or neoliberal win. And this is exactly why I refuse to trash on someone who I think is a woman of color progressive, that people wanted a woman of color progressive to run. And look, when she goes running, you guys all trash on her and don't know the whole story. And so I think that's why I got so fed up with it. So
I think she's got an amazing content of character. I love her stance when she left the DNC. That's how she really got on everybody's radar. And I think when she went to Philadelphia, she was overwhelmed by how many progressives just appreciated what she did and stood up to that. I mean, people want integrity. I mean, when it comes down to what progressives want from the establishment, we want accountability. We want accountability.
Integrity. We want honesty.
Integrity and accountability. Nobody's taking accountability for what had happened, and they just kind of push it off. Yeah, well, but Donald Trump, no.
Why are people so freaked out about Ocasio-Cortez? They can't figure out how she's got this following, how she's doing this, how people love her. They can't figure it out. They're studying it. They're spending money. They don't realize that it's just because she tells you the truth, and she's working for the people. That's it.
They're afraid of these women. There's another woman they're afraid of, fam. Kimberly Ellis and the California Democratic chair race is what's going on. Mm-hmm. So, fam, I finally got a chance to meet Kimberly Ellis the other day. It was awesome, by the way. Who is once again running for the California Democratic chair. Last time out, she lost a heated and questionable battle to Eric Bauman. A lot of people were blowing the whistle, saying this was unfair, that it was rigged, it was fixed. There's a lot of evidence behind it. They wouldn't let an independent analysis come in. So Eric Bauman was just recently forced to step down and miss sexual harassment allegations. And I got the chance to talk to her about election integrity moving forward. Take a look.
2016, the presidential the primary was a disaster. Discombobulated, I think by design. Your election, in fact, a lot of people still have a hard time swallowing what happened. They didn't let the independent analysis come in and check it out. What can we do this time to assure some election integrity in your election coming up? Because I'm quite fearful of the fact that if it's funny business again, people are just going to throw their hands up and walk away from the process. They already are doing that. They're flocking away from the Democratic Party because of that, because there is a lack of accountability and there seems to be no election integrity. And it's really surprising that the Democrats, I'm from Florida, they keep this ball rolling. What can we do to assure that this next election for you is going to be a fair election?
Yeah. I think that the delegates need to think about putting together a proposal of what the actual process looks like. I mean, quite honestly, one of the biggest things that we wanted to address, which I intend to address, is the ambiguity in our bylaws around a lot of things. And so making sure that our bylaws are very clear about everything from how the elections run to a transition period for when there are officer elections. I mean, even the governor has a transition period, right, before sort of the baton is passed. And so to have a situation where the person is elected chair on a Saturday and gavelled in on a Sunday without any kind of room for a review of ballots, or if there was a challenge or what have you, is just, I think, a recipe for failure. And so reviewing the bylaws to see where that clarity can be made, but the delegation, I think, should propose what that looks like. And just like I think with the ADEM elections, having certain systems in place to ensure that there is a level of transparency that people are comfortable with is probably the route to go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So there it is, fam. It's, Kimberly Ellis. I love this woman. I love this candidate because it's so funny because we're going to talk about her number one competition in this whole situation, which is a gentleman by the name of Daraka Larimore. Is it Larimore Hall?
Larimore Hall.
Larimore Hall. Daraka. You say the name Daraka, you know who he is. The reason it's so funny because Daraka was known or claimed to be a Bernie supporter, and Kimberly Ellis
He was a Bernie delegate.
He was a Bernie delegate, and Kimberly Ellis was known to be a Hillary supporter. But yet, it seems like a lot of the progressives now, the true progressives, are kind of backing Kimberly, and some of those establishment kind of party affiliate insiders are backing Daraka. Now, before we get into the pros and cons of each person, I have to say this because I do love Kimberly Ellis because I believe she's the perfect bridge between establishment and progressive people.
Right.
She's one of my favorite candidates because of that. Because even though she supported Hillary Clinton, she's pushed forth and she's recognized, like you said, she took...
she stood by us and recognized that we need election reform regarding election integrity. She also saw in 2016 how Berners got cheated and recognized it. She said, you Bernie people got screwed. She said that on June 23rd, 2017. And she said that at Bernie's coffee shop. So the people who were at Bernie's coffee shop during that time, Michelle, Eileen, and I think Jeremy White, all of these people, they heard her say it. And I think to me, when someone recognizes that there was a problem, that's when I see the growth, when I see the integrity, when I see, okay, like you may have been on the other side, but the fact that you even, supporting the person you supported had the ability to see, hey, that's not right. That's not right. And it's very hard for people to even do that. So
it's taking accountability, and that's what she does.
Yeah.
She's the perfect bridge. She takes accountability. She recognized the mistakes that the establishment made. She then presents solutions across the board on every single problem.
Right.
The question I asked her was so important to me because I believe in election integrity. And she believes in election integrity. Furthermore, in that conversation we had, she talked about making select committees to make sure that we are ready for the next primary when it comes to town. Because I talked to her about it and I said, this was all messed up and it seemed like by design. How do we fix this? And she's all about it. Election integrity is high on her list. Now, her number one opponent, his name is Daraka Larimore Hall. I have a little photo of him, and I want to point out something about Daraka because he has had issues before in the past when it comes to elections, speaking about his union position. But let's take a look at Daraka in the small video I have. He was on a panel not too long ago, and he's saying, not that video, the other video. There should be one more of Daraka, and we have positions, okay? Take a look, and look at his whole mentality. Okay, so right there, fam. This is the kind of mentality. And once again, a lot of people we've talked to out in the field, a lot of activists and stuff that said that Daraka always seems like he's got 1 foot in and 1 foot out. He's a burner and he's establishment. He just wants to be part of the party, but yet he's over here marching with us. I think this is the point where people it gets very convoluted. It gets very confusing. Is it okay to be a person who's an activist, but yet still sit in the room with those people at times? I mean, he's looking at it. That's his main type of tactic.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think we want a seat at the table. I don't think that's what the people questioning him are saying. I think, everybody wants a seat at the table. It is how you go about that and how much you sacrifice and how much of yourself you are willing to give up in order to get a seat at the table. How much you are willing to, I guess, exchange as far as your morality goes, as far as your integrity goes, to get a seat at the table. I think that is the feeling that many people we've spoken to. So many people that I've spoken to when it was a 2016 convention, he was a Bernie delegate. However, he was often hanging out with Hillary supporters, often, like as you said, had 1 foot in and 1 foot out the other. And this is actual statements from people that we've talked to that were there, and they weren't comfortable with that. Some people were saying it doesn't even seem like he's a real Bernie delegate. It seems like he's just going to go where the flow, whatever's most popular. It seems like he's buying on us. Like, they did not trust him. So someone being a Bernie delegate doesn't automatically mean you're a progressive to me, because there's a lot of people who have changed their ideology based on Trump deranged syndrome, based on, how awful 2016 was to us. It did something to many of us emotionally, mentally. And I think, just someone being a Bernie delegate or someone having supported one person doesn't automatically mean, at least to me, that you are a progressive. What I see as a progressive are your actions. And the actions of this man have at least been questionable as far as in the past. So,
well, you're saying questionable. We have to talk about this because we are big on election integrity. And we've been a lot of information where Daraka was on the head of the election committee for a union, and he actually stopped the vote counting, which just kind of drove me crazy. I was like, what are you doing over here? And they had all these excuses. So he's already been questionable in one election. The last election, I searched the internet going crazy to see if Daraka was standing up for the way the election process happened the last time the chair came to bid. I can't find anything.
He was actually supporting Bauman.
He was. I can't find of anything him standing up and saying these elections weren't fair. So he really does have a big X against him for not, being for proper elections, especially when he was the head of that union. Okay, he stopped, and that to me just drives me crazy. And there were all these excuses going out there. Listen, let the vote count. Have election integrity. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's look at his actions, not his words. For one, he did disparage candidate for Assembly District 63rd, Maria Estrada, in favor of Anthony Rendon. I mean, I'm not going to post this, but there are, screenshots, pictures of him speaking to her in a way that no person involved in our government should speak to anybody, let alone a woman, Latina, who's running against Rendon, who single-handedly killed single payer in California.
Yeah. I can't understand that, fam, because that's the whole thing. He sits up there, he says he's for Medicare for all, but yet he's publicly and openly trashing Maria Estrada. Now, I'm not going to say I love every single one of Maria Estrada's, the way she handles things. Her tactics are not always the best, according to somebody. But you know what? When it comes to policy, the woman cannot be moved. And she's for the people. She's for the people of a community. So when she is strongly for single-payer health care, you have to stand behind her.
At least
he stood for the person who's crushing single-payer
right.
healthcare. At
least be a little bit more bipartisan in your discourse, I would say. Also, as we've mentioned, Daraka was a Bernie delegate, but according to witnesses in the convention of 2016, he frequented Hillary supporters and was not cheering for Bernie. People claim he was not genuine and was only there to spy on Berners.
Yeah. There was a picture, I think, with him and Jenny, what's her name? Sarah Rose or somebody, a Clinton supporter. They were there together, and he immediately said, okay. It just seemed like he was being an opportunist. It's just like, okay, well, I'm going to support whoever wins on this, what's going on. But let's talk furthermore about number 3.
So, Daraka tried to sabotage and defeat a progressive union in 2011. This is what he was talking about. So election results come after student activists mobilized last week. This is from 2011 to defend a democratic elections process in the wake of the election committee. committee's decision to halt the vote count. That was the committee that
was
he was in
Daraka's
charge
decision.
of.
Yeah.
In a letter to members, Elections Committee Chair Travis Knowles says that the counting was halted because of the level of hostility in the crowded ballot courtroom. The issues, he wrote, included secret audio recordings of procedures, yelling, and physical altercations, all of which prevented the Election Committee from doing its job in counting the ballots. So he was claiming, and his people were claiming, that there was violence against them and that people weren't following procedure.
Yeah.
So the members of the AWDU, meanwhile, have called those claims fabricated, insisting that the counting was halted only after it became clear that the reformers might be able to win. So only after
half the votes were counted.
Daraka was losing.
Yeah.
The union was
stop.
They said that that's when they started saying these accusations. And this is the Auto Workers Union, by the way. In case,
and graduate students too. The union. Listen,
right.
Fam. This reminds me so much of what happened in Nevada. So many things were fabricated, that people were getting crazy. They were throwing chairs.
Yeah.
We saw one film of a guy pick up a chair and immediately his friends go around him. No, put the chair down. He put the chair down and the guy starts crying.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like he was just
They're
so
throwing
distraught.
chairs.
But all this thing that they're being, and in fact, the only person who was arrested was that one actor who was a Hillary supporter who punched some guy in the fucking nose. So this is like the same type of rhetoric. Once again, it's an excuse. They started counting half the ballots.
Mm-hmm.
They saw that they were going to lose. So therefore, election integrity, it's a big mark against Daraka when it comes to that.
Right. So he said he was one of those that was claiming he was threatened and that these people did not follow bylaws.
Show me a video. Show me something, because you got nothing.
And so this is from someone online that is to remain anonymous. Let's not forget that Daraka was ousted from the UAW 2865 UCTA union because he ran the union like a fiefdom, which one of the activists across the state sought to democratize. He actively fought against those democratizing the union, and his slate, which controlled the election committee, also shut down the vote counting when it became clear him and his cronies were going to lose. So this is a person's opinion, but I'm backing it with the article that was several articles actually that were written. He was president of the union at the time, and his slate controlled the committee. So,
I mean, come on, what kind of conditions do you need to have to stop counting ballots? Okay, like really, like people over there, they want to look, and it's
just shady because you're in control of that. So when you do that, it's kind of, and then according to the elections committee, there were a number of challenges to the elections process that were leveled by both sides of the election, said Daraka Larimore Hall, UC Santa Barbara graduate student and UAW, United Auto Workers president. In addition, folks on the AWDU side publicly stated that they were planning to object to the election before it even started. So they were objecting to this before it even started. So, but the AWDU claims that the election officials stopped counting ballots in order to keep the AWDU slate from winning the election.
Yeah.
So we won't know if the AWDU won the election until all the votes are counted, but it's hard to understand why else the current union administration would abandon the vote count without having counted nearly half the ballots cast in the election, said Cheryl Deutsch, AWDU candidate for president. So this was the adversaries.
Fam, if there was some serious shit going on, if the room was so hostile, where's the video on it? Let me see it. Because every single time we ask for proof and we start looking at these things, we see that it's a bunch of fugazi comments. That's it. This is all about Daraka stopping the vote because he was going to lose power. So, he caused this fugazi situation. It was getting crazy. It was getting nuts. It was so hostile. They were offending me. They talked about we had to stop. We couldn't count.
Yeah, clutch my
Please,
pearls.
fam.
So, and then
Strike
here's
two,
more.
election
People
integrity.
say that power concedes nothing without a struggle, and that's what we're seeing now, he said. Graduate students and the members of the union are taking our union back so that we can fight the budget cuts. So these reformers were trying to fight budget cuts, and Daraka was in the opposition. And he says, and I think that the amount of resistance shows just how far people are willing to go hang on to the privileges and perks of high-paid union positions. So this man is alleging that was why they stopped the vote count.
Yeah.
So there's also this, an open letter to Daraka Larimore Hall,
This is great.
President UAW Local 2865. Dear President Larimore Hall, as enrolled and active graduate students in the UC system, as elected officers and members of our union, and as candidates in our local's upcoming perennial elections, we are concerned about the persistently undemocratic role of paid staff in our local and the possibility that their lack of accountability to the membership at large may jeopardize the freedom and fairness of the upcoming election. We are concerned that several recent actions taken by yourself and these staff may violate our local bylaws. As you know, many of us have been concerned for some time about the role of paid staff in our local and their lack of accountability or even communication with campus unit elected officials or members. Trustee Cheryl Deutsch expressed many of these concerns in a letter to the Joint Council in January. You can read that letter here. A review of UAW 2865 payroll records on April 15th shows 12 staff who have been employed in a field organizing positions during the 2011. You hired at least 3 of these paid staff members without the knowledge or approval of our local's executive board. According to our local bylaws, the responsibility for hiring local union employees falls to the executive board. Of course, the executive board only regularly meets once a month, and our bylaws also give administrative authority to the president in between meetings and votes for the executive board. But it clearly contradicts the democratic intent of our bylaws for you not to even have informed the executive board of these hires.
He's abusing his power. He's abusing his privilege. It's once again, it's the hierarchy. Let's be part of the club. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a union official. Let me just, what's the word I'm looking for here on this? Like, when you don't use funds properly. You know what I'm saying? It's terrible what this guy's doing.
Even at the very least, it should just raise some concerns as far as a person when you see corruption in a person, as even if they were in a union position or not a super high position, although union positions are important, the integrity, again, is what we're looking at. And if we see some sort of like, wait a minute, like, and I would love to hear the other perspective. I'm completely open to hearing the other side, but all I'm hearing is multiple people say the same thing. There's multiple articles. There are these people who actually, I've been told, are willing to talk and actually in person say these things. So and
you know what? I don't even need their words. From reading everything I see and seeing everything, I mean, how do you stop the count without proof? I want to see proof that you actually had a reason to stop the count, and that's what I keep on regurgitating, and I'm going to keep on saying it time and time again. But fam, number 4, I like this one too, because we were deep in this thing, and this is just really there's different levels to this whole thing, especially when it comes to AB 84. Go ahead, fam.
So finally, let's talk about how Daraka came to decide to run. So from what I saw, not only did he manipulate AB 84, California's own Citizens United, to look like his and Kevin DeLeon's accomplishment as them saving California from, their own Citizens United, but the timing of the Eric Bauman allegations and his stepping down was an entire manipulation to get him to be issuing for CDP. And while let's just take a look at the fake Twitter account run by one of his fans. This is called Alt CDP, and you guys can go to the Twitter and decide for yourself. It's kind of a shady account. So on this account, you'll find interesting tweets promoting Daraka with a holier-than-thou kind of virtue signaling, also talking about the victims, but talking about it as in, we need to protect the victims, we need to protect the victims. Obviously, we do need to protect victims of any sort, but that's not what I'm saying. This account, you can see that they're urging people to be with the victims and claiming that that he knew nothing. Daraka knew nothing, that a lot of these people knew nothing, and even going as far as to criticize Congressman Ro Khanna for pushing Kimberly Ellis. So here we have a tweet. Do we have it? Okay. I don't see it on here, but I don't see it on here, but you guys can read it. You want to read it?
Right here it says, "Beware the charlatans," did I say it right, Dan?
Yeah.
"Who want to hijack the controversy for political gain, like homophobic failed candidate Maria Estrada and self-appointed Inquisitor Hans Johnson. Our trauma is not for your gain of pleasure. Shame, shame, shame."
So that's, to me, that's just kind of dismissing the fact that a lot of these people, not just Daraka, but a lot of these people surrounding Bauman knew, and they didn't say anything until it was politically opportunist. And even Ro Khanna, and when Ro Khanna says, hey, we need someone that's actually going to do something, and he pushes Kimberly Ellis, they attack him for doing that, even though they're doing the same thing on the other end. But I think what's most troubling are witnesses who want to remain anonymous and came forward to say that Daraka knew about Bauman and that he and others waited to reveal anything until they could use it for political leverage.
And that's the truth there too, fam. You know what I'm saying? We have a lot of people that we've talked to that don't want to go on the record and stuff. They don't want to really talk, but they say that Daraka knew of this behavior. And let me make this straight. Bauman was once Rendon's chief of staff. He was, you know what I'm saying? So the fact that he supported, Anthony Rendon with Bauman, it's like he was in the know. He had knowledge of this. I know he wants to sit there and act like he didn't know anything, but I'm so sorry. You supported an abuser. And you can try to turn your head away from it, but no, we got you on tape.
I think we have these here. If you want to read them, they're not on the thing.
I can't see that. Where's that?
Okay.
Okay, also helpful. I can't see that one.
Let me see.
Ro Khanna's post making this sharply political. People are trying to come to terms with talking about trauma, and Representative Khanna is introducing political quagmire that could take 6 to 8 months to resolve.
Right, so that was the one we were...
also unhelpful.
We were looking at, but let me actually read it because I just got it on my phone. This is someone who I said wanted to remain anonymous. Thanks, I'm not looking for sympathy, and in my case, his actions weren't criminal, speaking of Bauman. I complained to a few people at the time, as well as during the chair's campaign. Some people made excuses for him, Bauman, and others tried to recast my complaint as homophobia, which is something that, as we know, the Democratic Party and virtue signalers often do. Eventually, I just stopped talking about it, about the, harassment. In my case, it happened in public in the hotel lounge with Daraka Larimore Hall sitting right across from me. I remember the irony of Bauman telling me that he's a nurse and that he felt the spasms in my back from the muscle tension he caused by being a complete stranger who suddenly put his hands on me. I immediately knew this was someone I intended to avoid. Then I found out that he was the LA CDP chair. I'm not sure if I'm angrier at him or at the people who helped him maintain, and increase his power within the party. I also don't know whether he knowingly took advantage of his position of power or if he's merely lacking in social skills to knowledge required to recognize personal boundaries. Whatever the case, I think there's more fundamental issues here at stake. The systems we use to select and promote leaders appear to have bias that favors predatory and narcissistic individuals rather than weeding out problematic personality traits. First, past that, the post-elections actually favor them, and the justice system then attempts to correct the error after the fact via removal/penalty. This is an absurd and archaic view and way of doing things, given that we have known about alternative voting methods for decades. The time for systemic change is long overdue.
Wow. And big ups to the man or woman who said that. Well, it's a man who said that. We're not going to talk about his name, but once again, coming forth and knowing that this, they knew. I mean, they had to have known. I mean, we're not just spitballing here. We've been talking to people, and all these people say that they knew, that they just use it for political leverage right now. You know what I'm saying? The timing of it was just so out of the blue. All of a sudden now you want to call people out and protect the victims when you knew back when.
Yeah. And that's what angers me the most is like, you're out here touting about protecting victims. Obviously, there are multiple people, not just this man, who say that everybody knew, everybody in that circle. And again, Ed Buck, which just happened a week ago with the other dead body. You think these people didn't know that what Ed Buck was doing?
Schiff,
I mean, there are
Bauman,
screenshots of people things being sent to each other. There is evidence that these people are of a very inner circle, and they knew. And you see, this man says that they accused him of homophobia when he said, "Hey, Eric Bauman is a creep," or whatever he said. Like, oh, you're homophobic. Okay, so that you can't attack someone now because someone's going to claim that you're homophobic. And that's exactly what they did to Maria Estrada when she was trying to say that. And multiple other people who, like Lauren Steiner, who have basically tried to talk about this.
Bauman got up in her face. He bullied her.
It's gross. And like, it's gross that this happened, but it's also gross that there is like a cabal of wealthy Democratic people, donors like Ed Buck, and all of these people, they get protected from doing vile things to other people simply because of influence, money, and power. And you know what? We do need systemic change, and we don't want any of those people who have that kind of mentality in a position of power. And that is why we're bringing the story, because if you want to go and research it on your own, by all means do. This is not fabricated. This is not hearsay. This is all true, and this is all things that we're getting from people who want to speak out but are afraid because of how it will be perceived.
Yeah.
And I am all about protecting victims, but protecting victims for real, not protecting victims only to make myself look better and to make myself look like I am a savior of some sort, when really I didn't care about them months ago when they were going through this.
Yeah.
So,
and Daraka is also a huge virtue signaler. He always talks about he's a feminist man. He's for the LGBT community, whatnot. And when you have to say those things, but your actions don't show it. When this man was called a homophobe for coming and reporting these things, but you let it slide because politically it helped you. Stop with your virtue signaling because you have nothing to stand on. Fam, you said some amazing things today. You defended Tulsi. You supported Kim. We kind of you've been exposed, Mr. Lattimore. And listen, if Daraka wants to come and talk to us, if he would grant me an interview, I'd love to come interview you. I really would. I'd like to hear your side. I don't think he's as bad as Bauman, but I think he's still cut from the same tree. And we don't need that. Right now, more than ever, the strongest Democratic Party in the country, other than the National Party, is the California Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Kimberly Ellis is the best choice for this. This is her rightful throne or her rightful chair.
And I don't even like to say that because nobody is entitled to anything. You know what I mean? We'll see what happens when we let put the issues out there and when she goes and campaigns. But the thing is, I'm looking at the hypocrisy. We push women of color, we push women, and at the end of the day, when a progressive woman is coming, who has done the work, who has been through thick and thin, who has been basically destroyed by a lot of the establishment for pretty much standing with progressives, who is actually, a friend to Tulsi Gabbard, who is a friend to progressives, and she comes running, and then we're going to go and, and frame this whole manipulation to make this other person look like, oh, look, they're
like
good.
He's the savior,
and when I ask people why him, they say, he's the chair we need right now. That's not an answer. What does that mean? That's not an answer.
What does that even mean?
What?
Well, how is he the chair?
Give me a better answer.
Oh, because he exposed the bad things that were happening. No, he knew about it and he hit it. Unless he has something else to say. And when it comes to election integrity, Daraka is on record for sabotaging a union. Now, if he's got some things to say about that to clear his name, let him do it. But it's going to be really far-fetched in my mind that you can't even at least count the votes. That you weren't able to count the votes, and furthermore, you can't even produce any evidence showing that the situation was so bad that you couldn't count those votes. So unless you have some proof, you're still bad in my mind. Fam, we got to get out of here. We're going to talk on for hours. You're just in a mode. You got to go revolution. I want to say thank you very much for watching. I am Pasta Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella. Thanks, guys.
Can you give me a combo out?
Oh, apologies. Convo out.
Yeah.
What happened to you?